As you already know, I've today been appointed Prime Minister by the Queen, and there are one or two things I would like to say to you at once. First, that my task is to serve the whole nation. Secondly, no one need expect any stunts from me, merely plain, straight talking.
That was Alec Douglas-Home. It was his first TV address from Downing Street. We're joined now by Peregrine Worsthorne. He was deputy editor of the Sunday Telegraph at the time. He's back in a BBC TV series exactly 50 years ago to the day when he took part in a live panorama programme on what was then the Tory leadership crisis. Welcome back to the studio. You've been in and out since studio since then, of course. Let me ask you, when the Tory leadership battle began, when it was clear that Harold Macmillan was stepping down, Alec Douglas-Home wasn't regarded, he wasn't really on the list at the beginning, was he?
No, it was a surprise. And I suppose we ought to have guessed, because he'd had quite a successful party conference speech.
This was the famous Blackpool Party conference.
Famous Blackpool Party, just a few days before he got the job. And I remember sitting and Rab looked very disconcerted.
Right, this is Rab Butler,
who was, of course, expecting to succeed himself. And it did cross my mind then, I thought it was very, very difficult to believe, that Alec Douglas-Home wants to be Prime Minister and is going to try have a go. But before that, as you rightly say, I don't think he'd been a front runner at all.
And is it right to say that, I mean, Rab Butler was the front runner. He was seen as the heir. He'd been heir apparent for a long time to Mr. Macmillan. Is it right to say that actually Mr. Macmillan didn't want him, and that was the opening for Alec Douglas-Home?
I think one of the mysteries of British politics at that time was the degree to which Conservative members of Parliament distrusted Rab. And it was partly, of course, he'd not served in the war, which was still then a major Conservative plus. That there were certainly more Conservative MPs who had Macmillan and most of the front bench of the Tory party had suffered bad wounds in the First World War.
Yes, Macmillan had been in both World Wars.
But, yes. And Rab had sat at home. Nothing unworthy about it, but it was judged then that he wasn't a man of courage and decisiveness, and probably wouldn't make a good Prime Minister. But this view, I knew, was held. But I never thought it was held to that degree of passion that Rab would be stopped. I think that remains an unanswered question. Why? Because it can't really have been simply because he wasn't in the First World War. But in any case, he did arouse deep scepticism about his qualities.
We're talking 1963, heading up to 1964. Britain is becoming a very different country. The 60s are beginning to gather pace with all the changes that would imply. And here the Conservatives pick the 14th Earl of Home, who seems out of kilter with the times. The Tories will have been in power for 13 years by the time 64 comes around. Labour has chosen the grammar school boy, the technocrat, the economist, with the first from Oxford in Mr. Wilson. And yet the Tories lose by only 4 seats. It's a remarkable result.
Well, of course, the lure, the wisdom of the British people to elect people from the class that are trained to be politicians from the word go, it was still a possibility. It isn't now. But you and I have crossed swords on whether it should be.
We have indeed. I've still got the scars.
But I think I can't remember.
So I think it's just surprising that Labour didn't win by a lot more.
Yes, but I think Alec must take a lot of
You met him, didn't you?
Yes, I got to know him. I mean, journalists talk about knowing politicians. It's a very false claim, really. You know them on a particular reason and limited reason, so I didn't really know him in any proper way.